Hey, what's up? This is Gary from Raz Rentals, and today I'm really happy because I get to talk about NECA's brand new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fred Wolf series, for the most part, Tattoo and Wyrm. This two-pack right here is pretty exciting for me because both of these characters have been left out of most TMNT continuities. It's a shame, really. And this is the first time since 1991 that they've appeared in toy form. Now, I know that Wyrm was like a HeroClix, but come on, I don't count that. That's not the same as an actual action figure. And you think he would have had an action figure because he was in the 2012 series. But no, he's like the only character that appeared in the show that didn't get a toy. What a ripoff. I mean, come on. Everybody loved Wyrm back in the 90s. He was gross and creepy. You know, a perfect Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figure, in my opinion. Tattoo, I don't know. He's always been okay. I've said this before in my other reviews. Human characters in the Ninja Turtle toy lines just aren't as exciting for me. I love all the monsters, the mutants, the creatures, the robots, all that kind of stuff. When you get to the humans, it's like, I mean, he's a sumo wrestler with tattoos. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. But in this review, I'm going to go over their cartoon history, or lack of cartoon history. I'll talk about their accuracy with their on-screen counterparts. Just because this is a Raz Rentals review, I will be going over their history outside of their animated adventures. You know, it'll be very brief. It won't be like recently I did a Scale Tail review where I talked about the Playmates action figure, and I talked about all the other places he showed up in the different TMNT continuities. So eventually I plan on doing one of those for both Tattoo and Wyrm, and I will, save all the information for that. But in this one, I'll just talk about just a couple of things I think that are interesting about them. So let's begin. Tattoo and Wyrm here come packaged in NECA's standard two-pack packaging. You know, it looks like the turtle van with the green on top and the yellow on the bottom. This two-pack cost $64.99. And boy, prices have crept up a little bit here for these NECA action figures. You remember back when they were like $55? That's back in the day, like a year ago. This two-pack was released during Target and NECA's 2025 Holothon. Officially, that began on April 6th, although lots of people were finding them before that in stores. I didn't get mine until April 25th, whenever it was released on Target's website during the fourth, I think, week of Target and NECA's online Holothon drops. Or maybe it was the third week. It's basically every Friday in April, they were releasing new stuff. And this thing sold out within like 6 to 10 minutes. I actually missed out on it to begin with. I was all upset because I was trying to add a coupon to save some money. I was trying to get this and the Old Man Raph action figure. But the coupon wouldn't go through, and then all of a sudden my card said, "Oh, this was missing." And I was like, "Son of a bitch. I can't believe I missed it." Like, I honestly didn't think that this would sell out so quick because I don't know, there are some of the recent NECA stuff will like stay up for quite a while before it sells out. And I thought that this wouldn't sell out even though it does, include a very cool looking Wyrm action figure. But luckily, I hit that little notify me of when it's available again. That button on the Target app. And within, I think, what was it, like 2 to 3 hours or something like that, I heard ding, 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 it's back in stock. I was able to get it. I was super happy. I will say this, I did see, leading up to that day, I saw a few people on like different Facebook groups being like, "Hey, if you get this two-pack, I only want the Tattoo action figure. Can you sell me that and keep the Wyrm for yourself?" Or I would see the opposite, like, "Hey, I'm only looking for Wyrm. Like, if you buy that two-pack, would you sell me the Wyrm action figure and keep the Tattoo?" Like, why the hell wouldn't you want both of these guys? These guys are classic action figures, and, both of them look pretty cool. After all of the ordering was done, I got mine on the 3rd of May, which was this past Saturday. So 25th to the 3rd, It's not that long. I think it was 6 days. The packaging here is really nice because the window's really big. You can see most of the action figures. Like, you can see all of Tattoo's large sumo wrestler body, and you can see all of Wyrm's big mouth. The illustrations down the bottom were done by frequent NECA Fred Wolf series artist Aaron Hazuri. He's a really great illustrator. You could find some of his posts about this art on his Facebook page. And what's interesting is he actually included the full body shots. Here they're cut in half, but here's Tattoo. He looks really good. But obviously, for me, the cooler one is Wyrm over here. Like, he looks great. Now, interesting enough, Aaron made his foot yellow in that original artwork. I can't remember exactly what he said, although I think he said something like to the effect of like, well, I knew nobody would see the bottom of his body, so I wasn't sure what to do. I think that's what he might have said. Over on this side here, there's a very animated pose of Tattoo on the attack. He looks very aggressive here, and he looks just like he does in the cartoon. In the cartoon, he's pretty aggressive. And then on the other side, there's a spooky shot of Wyrm. Like, could you imagine seeing this guy walking down the street or in some shadowy area? It'd freak you out. It kind of looks, though, as though that tentacle leg probably limits the poses you'll be able to do with him. But we won't find out until we open it up. Turning to the back, you get another set of expressive poses. Nothing too crazy, but still good enough, Like, Tattoo really looks like he's coming after you. But if you zoom in on Tattoo's gut area, all I see in my head, all I see is a creature, just going, ooh! And once again, Wyrm looks good, but obviously you can see here, he's just standing straight up, probably because of that tentacle leg. Back to the front and onto the bottom. Here it lists some of the great people that brought this action figure to us. It says director Randy Falk, Trevor Zamet. Should it say directors? Sculpt and fabrication, Tony Cipriano, Kashwara Studios. Paint, Jeff Trapp, Mike Puzo. Prototypes, Roger Fernandez. Photography, Stephen Mazurik. Illustrations, Aaron Hazuri. Packaging, Travis Hastback. Nickelodeon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Viacom, International, Incorporated, whatever. All right. So now it's time for me to open these dudes up, move them around. Hopefully everything's copacetic and nothing's broken, but we'll see. Yeah. I will be back in a second. Oh, one thing I should mention. I do like that they seem to put a little bit of extra protection here in front of Wyrm's face. I'm sure to either protect it from getting scuffed up, or maybe if it opens up, maybe it was just meant to keep the mouth closed. But either way, I do like it. I do like it when these toy companies try to do whatever they can to protect the action figures and the integrity of the paint job. So here they are, free from their prison of cardboard and plastic, ready to crush, smash, and grind the turtles into fertilizer. These guys look pretty awesome, I gotta say. Although, right off the bat, there is one problem that I had right out of the package, and that is Tattoo here. It appears as though he's supposed to have a set of gripping hands. I got one left gripping hand, and then a duplicate of the reaching right hand. So that kind of sucks. I probably won't return this set, but I don't know. I'll probably figure something out. Who knows? Maybe I'll contact NECA. Now, I know that Wyrm here is actually based on an animated version of Wyrm that appeared in a commercial for the Wyrm action figure. But just like PandaCon, you have this What If PandaCon? I hope PandaCon and Wyrm are, I don't know, a taste of things to come. Hopefully we get more and more Ninja Turtle characters who were not in the cartoon in the Fred Wolf style. You know, Trevor, if you're watching this, as if, I need all of these guys reimagined in the Fred Wolf style. Look, if they ever made a Fugitoid that was supposed to be in the cartoon, I would want him to be colored like this. I love the gold and the blue and everything like that. You know, you could say like they could probably redo a Ray Fillet, even though they have one from the Archie series. You know, most of the designs in the cartoon are very similar to the original toys. So, you know, make another Ray Fillet. Even though I don't have them here, make Scratch, Sandstorm, and, you know, Hotspot. I don't really care that much about Hotspot. I think the only other mutant that's not here, but was in the cartoon that they don't have an action figure of, is Murdude. So NECA definitely needs to make this guy because he actually was in the series, as well as a Tempestra action figure. And heck, don't just keep it to the toy line either. Give us other mutants, like Lobster Dude from Ninja Turtles magazine, #1. Both Tattoo and Wyrm originally appeared in the 1991 wave of the classic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles toy series. Here you can see how these Playmates action figures translated into the Fred Wolf series. And yes, I do know that I don't have the Fred Wolf version or the NECA version of Space Usagi, but I don't even think that's supposed to be like a Fred Wolf version of him. I know it's like in this line, but to me it doesn't look like how he would have appeared in the show. I kind of wish that they would have went with this more Playmates style. Like the one they released looked more like something that Stan Sakai would actually design. Which, don't get me wrong, I like Stan Sakai's work. I think he's great and all, but I don't know. I want another version of this Space Usagi. Like I would have loved an Ultimates version of this. And I also didn't include Super Shredder, but would it be cool if NECA did like a cartoon version of Super 7? Or I'm sorry, of Super Shredder? Probably. You know, it might be nice to see what he would look like in animated form. But like, other than that, all we really need from 1991 is Sergeant Bananas and Walkabout, which is kind of interesting because like barely any of these guys became Ultimates, and we have like, you know, all these great versions of them in the Fred Wolf series. Boy, Super 7 really dropped the ball when it came to the 1991 action figures. And yeah, I guess the other thing is I would say my favorite year of Ninja Turtle toys was 1990. But a lot of these action figures here are my favorite Fred Wolf action figures. Like I love Ground Chuck and Dirtbag. I thought that they were incredible when they came out. They still look really awesome. Razar there looks great. And now Tattoo and Wyrm continue the greatness of these NECA action figures. Of these characters that appeared in the show, Tokka and Razar appeared in Season 7's Dirk Savage Mutant Hunter. That was in 1993. But Chrome Dome, Ground Chuck, Dirtbag, and Tattoo first appeared in Season 5's Planet of the Turtleoids. This was a hour-long special, so they tried to cram in as much stuff as possible. I think even that golden Technodrome at the end is kind of like their way of sneaking the Technodrome Scout into the series. Now, Chrome Dome, Ground Chuck, and Dirtbag would make other appearances in the show, but for Tattoo, this was his one and only appearance. I've talked about this episode before. I discussed it during the Mondo Gecko, or my Mondo Gecko review, because Mondo came with Kerma, the Turtleoid. And I also discussed it again whenever Ground Chuck and Dirtbag came out in their 2-pack. And then another time I discussed it whenever Chrome Dome came out. So in this review, I'm only going to discuss what happens with Tattoo. I'm not going to talk about the entire episode. As Planet of the Turtleoids Part 1 opens, the guys are walking through the streets of New York City in the dead of night, heading to their favorite pizza joint, where Mikey hopes to score some anchovy and hot fudge pizza. Disgusting. As they walk by Howard's Pets, they see something rather peculiar. A giant tattooed grunting and squealing sumo wrestler. Uh, a sumo wrestler who just so happens to break inside the pet store. He's up to no good. Or maybe he's not. Depends on your point of view. The turtles ditch their disguises and head inside. And what takes place is a rather decent fight. It's okay. Right off the bat, Raph calls Tattoo Tubby, and the fight begins. Now, I honestly think that they did Tattoo a little dirty here, and it's only going to get worse. To begin with, as I said, while he was breaking in, he's like grunting and squealing like almost like a pig. And when the turtles first confront him, he's just like, "Me, Tattoo." Couldn't they make him a little smart? He does pick up a giant cash register counter and he chucks it at the guys, which I do like. But even then, he's still like, "Me look for home." So the fight continues with the usual TMNT fight tropes. Tattoo throws Donnie. Villains are always throwing the good guys. Raph jumps at Tattoo and he misses, crashes into some stuff. All of that is kind of boring. The best part, the absolute best part, is whenever Tattoo is trying to crush Mikey with his massive sumo stomach. I don't care how old you are, that'll make you laugh. I mean, look at Mikey's face here. That's that's just hilarious. During this embarrassing ordeal, Leo manages to save Mikey by throwing a birdcage over Tattoo's head. Tattoo is stunned at first, but then he retaliates by throwing a cat tree at Leonardo. And Leonardo quickly cuts through that thing. Just when things are really amping up, Tattoo runs over and he rips an electrical box off the wall. Now he's swinging a live wire around, swinging it at Leonardo. But don't worry, Leonardo is safe because Tattoo basically just lets this wire wrap around him and then it electrocutes him. Once he gets a jolt of electricity, he reverts back to his original form. A hamster. A friggin' hamster. Now, I don't know if this was meant to be like a joke. Like, hamsters are funny, but I'm not laughing. Tattoo was only on screen here for about 1 minute and 50 seconds. And it's kind of lame when you think about it. Like, he really got a crappy deal. He made such a little impression on me that even though I had this DVD for years, I completely forgot that he was in this thing until like a year or two ago. Anyway, Tattoo, the hamster, originally came from this pet store, and that's why he broke in here. He wanted to go back home. Through some exposition, I think Donatello mentions that recently the Shredder has been messing around with some with mutagen. So Tattoo here was stolen by the Shredder, and then Shredder mutated him with some mutagen into this sumo wrestler, which I don't even understand. Humans will turn into animal mutants, but never in this series do animals get mutated into humans. That's not how the mutagen works. And also, why did a jolt of electricity turn Tattoo back into a hamster? Like, is that all you need? Could the turtles just electrocute Splinter and turn him into Hamato Yoshi? Now, a little later, after this encounter with Tattoo, Shredder, Bebop, and Rocksteady goes to the zoo where they take a bull and a mole and they mutate them into Ground Chuck and Dirtbag using the same mutagen. So like I said, why did this hamster turn into a sumo wrestler? Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't connect with anything else in the show. When it comes to cartoon accuracy, I think Tattoo is pretty faithful. He's not 100% perfect, but it's just some minor differences, and depending on how picky you are, it may bother you and it may not. For me, I don't know. Some of it, I could see how you would want it to be 100% accurate, but it also kind of doesn't bug me that much. Maybe because I don't care as much about Tattoo as some of the other guys. And plus, there's not really much going on with his style to begin with. He's just a guy with very minimal clothing. It's just a couple of tattoos. Speaking of the tattoos, for the most part, they match the show. You have the Black Widow spider on his stomach. That's there. And then you have a heart on his left shoulder, and also one on his right thigh. And then there's a lightning bolt on his right shoulder, and another one on his left thigh. At first I thought these lightning bolts were different than how they appear in the show. Like, at first glance, they look just solid black, but under heavy lights, you could see that the lightning bolt on his thigh is actually filled in with a dark blue color, I think. That's sort of like how it appears in the show, but it's still a little different. It almost looks like a gray in the cartoon. On his big back, he doesn't have any tattoos at all, so that matches the toy perfectly fine. And on his arms, he has those yellowish greenish straps on his elbows. And as you can see here, it's got like a little bow or whatever, a knot with a little bit of extra cloth hanging off. That's how it is in the show. He also has chains around his wrist. That matches. That's good. He, of course, has his sumo diaper, or mawashi. I think that's it. Mawashi. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's gray. It matches the cartoon perfectly fine. There's not really any extra detail on that that's really worth noting. But then down on the bottom of the legs, here you have a pretty big miss, in my opinion. And like I said, it doesn't really bug me that much, but it's just kind of weird that they didn't include it. But right below the knee, there's supposed to be an extra strap there. A yellowish-greenish strap. But they left it off the toy. That's kind of strange, You think they would have included that. I think the sandals look good. I got no problems with that. They connect around his feet just fine. On the bottoms, it's just that solid greenish color. In the show, however, the bottoms of his sandals are actually a gray color. The final thing we have to talk about is his face, the head. I don't know. I think that the face sculpt here is really good. I like it. I just kind of feel like it might not match how he appears in the show. There's just something about the nose. It almost looks like his nose is turned up a little more than it actually appears in the cartoon. He does have 2 earrings, and, there's lots of shots in the show where he does have 2 earrings, but then there's also a couple shots where he either doesn't have earrings or maybe he only has 1 earring. The original action figure only had 1 earring, but we're going to look at that in a minute. The other thing I would say is, I feel like his chin is like a little pointier. Like it all kind of points downward, right? Where in the cartoon, I think his chin is much more of like a square. It's just very square. I was thinking maybe they had to do that to allow for the articulation, because if it's square like that, it might be stopped by his chesticles. But because now you can like move the head around and you could turn it a little more, and like the chin fits in there perfectly fine. Where if it was square, like I said, you might not be able to turn it as much. I think when it comes to proportions, I think he's laid out pretty good. I like how big his stomach looks on this action figure. The only thing I would say is, in the cartoon, I feel like his torso is a little longer. Maybe the head is a little higher up on the body. Like, it's like here he's kind of squashed, and it makes his stomach appear even bigger. Where the cartoon, it just might be a little taller. I don't know. It doesn't bother me. It's just, like I said, it's a little observation of kind of what I'm seeing on the actual model and the show. Trying to figure out tattoo scale is actually pretty difficult because there's basically no clear shots of him standing next to anyone. Even when he's fighting the turtles, I mean, the best shot you can take a look at is this one where he's crushing Michelangelo with his gut. If you use your imagination and stand Michelangelo up, it almost kind of looks as though Mikey is around the same size as him. It's just, it's kind of hard to tell. Here you can see I tried to put tattoo among everybody. Well, I tried to shove as many people as I possibly could in this frame so you can get an idea of how he scales with everybody. I think it's a good height, you know. I'm okay with him being shorter than the Shredder. He's shorter, but, you know, bigger. I feel like he fits in pretty well with everybody in this shot here. He's bigger than Michelangelo, which I think is fair. You know, you want him to be... I mean, I personally would want him to be bigger than the Ninja Turtles. I mean, the Ninja Turtles are supposed to be like 4 foot or something like that. They're supposed to be tiny. If you look at the original toy, you can see that the Fred Wolf people kept him pretty close to the source material. I mean, he doesn't really change that much. He did have 1 earring, and this guy has 2. He did have the same type of arm straps tied above the elbow there. And then you also have the chains around the wrist. On the original action figure, his mawashi was black, and they made it gray. He also had this very cool dragon belt. You know, there's some nice texture on that, some nice scales. And like, you know, this guy didn't come with these tattoos. If you're unaware of the original tattoo action figure, the original one came with like a sheet of tattoos, and you can put them wherever you wanted to. So it's not like he originally had them. You could place them however you wanted. And most of mine have fallen off. Down at the sandals, you can see, like, get a better idea of how the sandals were supposed to work, where you have these straps going across his calves and stuff. You know, they're all kind of connected. He doesn't really have full-on sandals, actually. He just kind of has these straps wrapped around him, where here you can actually see, you know, the sole of the sandal. It also looks like he has like he's got something tied around his big toe right there too. The Fred Wolf version didn't have that. He's rocking a toe ring, I guess. One thing I gotta say is it was probably for the best that Fred Wolf toned down the skin color. The original one looks like he may have like tried to squish Private Snafu or something like that. Is that reference too obscure? Well, let me put it this way. He looks like Bugs Bunny and him could have gone at it in some kind of Warner Brothers wartime cartoon. One of the banned ones. As I said before, my tattoo does not have all of the tattoos. I think I have more of them somewhere in a box. So I can't show you everything on him, but I can show you on the card that on this list of tattoos right here, the terrifying tattoos, you can see that there was indeed a spider tattoo, very different from the Black Widow one in the Fred Wolf show. There was also a heart tattoo that it's, you know, a little more intricate than the basic heart tattoo in the cartoon. And he also had a bolt of lightning. Here it was yellow. You know, if you look at the original Paint Master, or whatever you want to call it, the prototype picture on the back of the original tattoo card, it looks like he actually has some different tattoos. And look at that spider. That spider looks just like the spider, you know, the Black Widow spider in the cartoon. Plus, it also looks like there's a heart on his left shoulder. There's a blue lightning bolt on his left thigh that looks a lot different than the lightning bolt that we got. It also looks like there's a blue lightning bolt on his right shoulder. The only thing I can't make out is what's on his right thigh. You know, where'd they come up with the other heart that's on that thigh? So I guess the animators must have based Tattoo's cartoon appearance on this card art. Since we're still looking at the original action figure in the card here, let's talk about the Sumo Snake Burnisher. Sumo Snake Burnisher staff. Do I not understand what that means? I guess not. Now, this is a very cool weapon for the original action figure to have. You would have thought that maybe they would have given him something similar. You know, even though it wasn't in the cartoon, NECA could have given him some kind of weapon like this. I mean, they did. They gave Wyrm a weapon that he didn't have in the commercial. But I mean, hey, look at this. If you want to use this with your brand new Fred Wolf's tattoo. Jeez, I can't even figure out what his name is. You know, I gotta say, I'm glad that his wrist chains are actually sculpted onto his body. Well, they're not sculpted, but they're attached a little better than the ones that Bebop has, because they always fall off when you try to change the hands. But look at that. That actually looks pretty cool, you know? So I guess NECA didn't need to include one of these. You just need to go out and buy a second one. Looks nice. When it comes to articulation, I think Tattoo more or less has what you would expect from NECA at this point. You have a ball joint in the head here, so you can look side to side. You can look up a little bit. You can't really look down. You know, his head will only go so far. You also can't really spin it around too much. It gets stopped by the shape of the head. There is some articulation in the hair here. There's a swivel. And then the shoulders have a swivel. They have a hinge. Pretty good range. There's a bicep swivel. Now, the elbows are double jointed, and I don't know, I've said this before, sometimes double jointed elbows look kind of weird to me. So usually I only bend them at the one elbow. It's usually the bottom one, whichever one makes it look like a nice flush arm. I think that one looks pretty good. However, on the other side, I could not get this joint to move at all. I can only get the top one to bend. And when you bend this one, I mean, you have this huge gap here in the elbow, and to me that is just kind of weird looking. So I don't know, maybe I'll try to warm it up or do whatever I can to move it, but at the moment it just seems a little strange to me. And then you have a swivel at the wrist and a hinge. You have upper torso articulation right here, so you can turn them around. Although I would be careful in my opinion, because I wouldn't want to like scuff this spider tattoo. Like I would only go so far with that. It feels like that only swivels though. It doesn't have like a, maybe there's, yeah, there's a ball joint actually. I just couldn't get it started. And then the waist here is just a swivel. You got your basic NECA hips with the ball joint. And then he does not have double jointed knees. Do many NECA toys have double jointed knees? I don't think so. But these ones are fine. I think I was having trouble moving one of these too. Like, these are very stiff. And another thing too is, like, as usual with the NECA stuff, you, the joints, like the pins are painted. So once you start moving them, that paint peels off. And even though the pin isn't, I don't know, that much different than the paint, it's still noticeable. Geez, I can't even, there we go. So when you can actually move the knee, it's pretty well. And it has a swivel too. One thing, oh yeah, you know what? You can't see the pins here. So that's pretty good. And then the ankle, of course, has a hinge and also ankle rockers. And that is all, I believe. Unless you can't move in the earrings around. On Tattoo's side of accessories, he doesn't have much. You know, I told you before he had a pair of reaching hands, and he also has a pair of gripping hands, even though I only got one gripping hand. And then he has the hamster version of Tattoo, which is, it's okay. You know, I think that the likeness of this hamster is actually pretty good. The sculpt is nice. I think the face matches how he appears in the cartoon, so I think that's great. Look at him. He almost got a little smile on his face because he's trying to go home. The only nitpick I have is, I think in the cartoon, the gray of his fur, the dark part, is a lot darker in the show. And then the gray on the underside of him, the underbelly, I feel like that's a lot lighter than it appears here too. So I feel like there's not as much contrast. The colors don't necessarily match, but it's still a very nice looking hamster, as much as I dislike Tattoo being a hamster. I know what you're probably thinking though. How does he compare to Michelangelo the gerbil? Look at how crazy that Michelangelo looks. He looks like a fighter. He looks like he could kick the shit out of this happy little hamster. He's going to scratch him. Man, that is one aggressive looking Michelangelo. Before we move on to Wyrm, I just want to say that Tattoo was originally created by Mirage Studios regular Eric Talbot. He teamed up with Kevin Eastman a lot. A lot of his work with Mirage was as an inker, but he did pencil a few comic books. You know, some of them were solo projects. Personally, I really love his inking. My favorite issue that he inked, most likely, was probably issue number 20. I thought he had the coolest inking style out of all three of them. Peter Laird, Kevin Eastman, and him. Even though I do like Kevin Eastman's dark tones and inking too, there was just something so gritty and like dirty looking about Eric Talbot's. I love that one. It's so moody. Zog never looked better. And speaking of Zog, I actually have this cool 11 by 17 print that Jim Lawson drew and Eric Talbot inked. And heck, while we're talking about Eric, another thing I want to point out is I got this very cool portfolio called Out of My Skull. And the art in this is really cool too. You know, it's a shame that he didn't really get a chance to pencil or like tell many Mirage stories, even though I think the ones he did are pretty nifty. I don't know. I like Eric's work because this is the kind of artwork I would have loved way back in high school. You know, I feel like he's the most heavy metal out of all the Mirage guys. He's always just drawing monsters and evil looking things. But I also think that Eric, out of everybody at Mirage, evolved the most. Because like this was his style back in the day. But then here is his style now. And it is completely different. You know, it's still dark and sort of has like this, I don't know, metal or goth feel to it. I love it. I love how it's like streamlined, but just kind of looks still kind of creepy or something. You know, I really like what he's done. It almost kind of makes you think like, how could this guy create such a simple character like Tattoo? You know, there's nothing that special about him, but if you think about it, Tattoo actually makes sense because Eric also works as a tattoo artist. So obviously he's had some affinity of the medium. He loves the craft of it all, I guess. And I don't blame him. Who doesn't love the craft? Fruza Bach was awesome back in the day. So anyway, the original toy came out in 1991. That same year, he appeared in Planet of the Turtleoids on August 31st, 1991. And then after that, he next appeared in TMNT Adventures number 32, which came out in May 1992. In the Adventures comics, he has a black chihuahua named Inky, which, you know, was also created by Eric Talbot. It makes sense. You know, maybe if Fred Wolf mutated him into this little black chihuahua, maybe I would have been okay with it instead of a stupid hamster. That's all about Tattoo for now. Now on to Wyrm's one and only animated appearance. Wyrm showed up in an old Playmates commercial that pushed some of the figures from 1991. Even though Wyrm is grouped with the heroes on the back of his card, and, you know, he's considered a hero, in this commercial, he's considered one of the villains. Now, I was able to check out this commercial, and so can you, on the Rad Plastic TMNT Toys YouTube channel. As this commercial opens up, there's some neat Chrome Dome animation. You know, it looks a little different than how he appeared in the actual series. It looks much more like the actual action figure, which is, you know, just a few subtle differences. Mikey says that, we got him outnumbered, dudes, as he's talking about the villains. And then it cuts to Wyrm, and Wyrm says, not so fast, turtle scum. As it cuts to the actual action figure, the narrator exclaims, oh, it's that trashed out Wiggler the Wyrm, with his disgusting worm-eaten smile. I think he says eaten smile. It's kind of hard to tell him. Maybe I'm a little deaf. And that's basically it for Wyrm in animated form. You know, this original Wyrm, of course. You know, Dirtbag has some neat animation in this commercial, and so does Groundchuck. Although Groundchuck gets a little kind of weird when he's like, the way his arms don't look, I don't know, they look a little weird. But back to Wyrm. There's a couple things I want to mention here. First, Wyrm always talks with his disgusting worm tongue. The action figure had a regular tongue. Here it's just the worms sticking out of his mouth. Another thing I wanted to mention was it appears as though his eyes bug out only when he's in the middle of some squashing and stretching. And, it doesn't look like he's popping them out on purpose. It looks like he's just kind of smearing across the screen, but it's not a good smear like you would have seen in like a Looney Tunes cartoon, like the Dover Boy. Yeah, it's the Dover Boys. It's a little too slow. It looks maybe a little sloppy, in my opinion. It would have been nice if he just kind of bugged out the eyes when he was talking, but they look like they kind of go back to normal when he's, like I said, not moving. They did simplify his design a lot more than the other villains in this commercial. I mean, look at Chrome Dome. Now, I know this isn't Wyrm related, but, I figured since I saw it here, I would talk about it. If you look at the animation, you'll see a red tool belt around Groundchuck. It goes around his belly and it goes around his shoulders. And then same with the footage of the action figure. It's also on Dirtbag's card art and also on the action figure in the promo shot, like on the back of the card. What the hell happened to this red tool belt? I didn't see any mention of it at all in the Rad Plastic book. I kind of feel like it's just something that's been forgotten. When it comes to cartoon accuracy, there of course isn't much to look at. There's not much reference of Wyrm, so NECA, in my opinion, did a good job of incorporating elements from the commercial and also including a lot of inspiration from the original action figure. Just off the bat, one of the things I want to mention that I really like about this action figure is originally I thought the tail was just kind of stuck in the way it is in the box, but thank goodness this is actually a bendy tail. It would have been nice if this was maybe, I don't know, you wouldn't want it to be thinner because you want it to match the other leg, but it's, I think, a little too hard to bend the leg up here. Like down here, at least you can sort of make angle it forward. That way you can balance him a little more when you're trying to get him into different poses. I mean, it's just going to be difficult in general to get him into some dynamic things because you got the tail on this side. And I think there's also something a little wonky or clunky about this big foot over here. It kind of gets in the way when you're trying to pose him. Very cool looking dynamic action figure, but like I said, if you want to get him into some cool poses, you're going to be working at it. So unlike Tattoo, we're going to take a look at Wyrm side by side with the original action figure while we're going over the cartoon accuracy or the animation accuracy, because I think there is a lot of spots on this action figure that are more inspired by the original action figure than that actual commercial. If we start at the head, the face is a very good likeness to how he appears in the cartoon, but of course there's some extra details here that aren't included in the animation. Like you have all these extra lines here around the mouth to, show some kind of creasing, some wrinkles and stuff. Very much like the original action figure. There's also a lot of bumps on the skin. And those bumps were, of course, included on the original toy. In the commercial, like I said, it is very, very simplified. The biggest difference with the original toy and the animation is just the color of everything, because around the eyes, all this goop popping out of his eye sockets and the slobber coming out of his mouth, it's all green in the animation. It's green on this toy. And then on the original one, it's purple. It's a nice little gross purple. And then the hair up top, that is more, it's green here. The original action figure had purple. I will say this, if you look at the hair in the commercial, it is much more thin than this action figure. Like this here, he really has like a little bit of a full head of hair. I'm really getting a lot of Muppet vibes from this Wyrm for some reason. He looks like something that could have been seen on Fraggle Rock. Am I the only one that sees that? I think the teeth of this action figure here on the right, I think it matches the teeth on the original action figure more. It's just because it looks like there's more teeth in the mouth. If you look at the cartoon, there's, sharp pointy teeth, but they're very few, like especially on the bottom of his mouth. Like, look, it looks like there's only like, I think it was like 3 or 4 on the one side. Here, there's 5. And they're just, you know, a little smaller. In the commercial, I think Wyrm's torso is a little bland. There's no creasing, you know, there's barely any of that ripped area down the bottom where his suction cup skin is sticking out. But here on this action figure, they really added a lot of creasing, a lot of wrinkles. It looks really cool. Like, you really get the sense that this cloth material is stretched around his disgusting body underneath, which is much more like the original action figure. The only thing that they didn't include here is this unsanitation department sticker on his, or print on his torso. The collar, though, is definitely much more like the animation than the action figure. The collar on the original one has, it looks a little, no, it doesn't really look tore at all. It just looks like a, like it's folded over here. And it's pretty straight going up to the back of him. I really think his design has always been cool. I always loved the suction cup body underneath. You know, the one thing I would say is maybe Aaron Hazuri was right to have colored his foot yellow. Because look, you have the suction cups here and it's all in this yellow area. So if you would think about it, maybe that would come down here the leg. Down here on the shin, there's suction cups. So maybe that should be yellow. Maybe the toes should be blue, but at least here where the suction cups are, that should have been yellow. The original action figure had those suction cups there too. And you know, in the original card art, or not the card art, but the promo shots that they have on the back of the cards, the leg is not painted a different color. However, on Scott Hensey, I think that's how you pronounce his name, on his Instagram page, he's shared some original paint applications done to Wyrm, and one of them there looks like as though there's a different paint on that bottom portion of the leg. The Wyrm belt appears just like the animation. I think the segments and just the proportions of it looks a lot like how it appears in that commercial. The original one has so much more detail that is not included. His right arm has a, you know, his clothing comes down here, down to his wrist. On the original action figure, there's all these extra tears, like on the tricep here, up on the shoulder. It was always unpainted. They didn't include that, but they did include this one over here, I think. Or maybe you can count the other one. There's a tear right here, or maybe it's this tear down here. Whichever one you want to count. Needless to say, they did include one tear on the bottom of the shirt in the animation. It looks like it's around his elbow, and this action figure again has it by the elbow. The animation, of course, has a green fingered hand wearing a red glove. This toy has that, but the original toy had purple fingers. On the right arm, now here's where things get a little weird, right? I know Wyrm is supposed to be like a flatworm or something like that, but I've always thought that even if Ryan Brown won't admit it, I feel like he is definitely inspired. The original design in the Archie comic books is definitely inspired by Bloodsucker. I mean, it's the same idea. So, like, he has these little tiny worms, or in my opinion, I think they're leeches on his arms. Well, they're all over his body, but there's one right here. Now, NECA decided to leave like a open sore area right here where you can kind of see like that, I don't know, segmented section underneath the bicep. Plus, they added a leech or a worm, whatever you want to think that is. In the animation, they only have the leech there. It doesn't look like one of the segmented pieces. On the back of the bicep here, you have like, I don't know, the original Wyrm, it kind of looks like his skin is kind of being stretched. Almost as if his skin is wrapped around many worms inside of his body. Like maybe his skeleton is just a few different worms wrapped around each other. That to me is what those segmented areas look like underneath the blue flesh. However, on this action figure, it's just kind of a very big open one. This big segmented piece here. It almost looks like you can see like the muscles underneath his arm. In the cartoon, there is also, I'm sorry, in the commercial, You do have this open area right here. The original one had like this very long segmented piece. It almost kind of looks like a bone, but like I said, I kind of just think it's a worm. And NECA included an extra worm, not an open area, right here on the forearm, and one back here. Now on this arm, another thing that you should look at is the original action figure sort of has this very protruding elbow sticking out there. In the animation, you can also see that it still has that protruding elbow. They did that a little bit here, but, you know, they didn't get too crazy with it, probably because, you know, it kind of gets stopped here by the rest of the arm. And then, of course, he has an open hand with green fingers, and the original toy had an open hand with purple fingers. These gross worm fingers. So that's everything included in the animation, and now everything else is just NECA interpreting the original action figure. Like I said, it comes down here into this tentacle tail, just like the original action figure. However, this one, the original one, like that yellow piece, would have went all the way down to the bottom. It just was unpainted. There are little baby worms here, or leeches, on the tail, especially down here where it curves over. They have those two down there, and then there's they included two on the back. The original one had one, it seems. Oh, look, there's one up here. Maybe that one's this one and this one's that one. Like I said, I didn't notice it was stretchy until I saw these little dots. Then you're like, oh, there's a metal wire in there. I can move this around. Over here on this side, he has a tear on his thigh. The original one had a worm or a leech or whatever you want to call it there in that spot. They did not include that. It might have been a little crowded there. He does have like more of these like worms sticking around here, like actual little worm bits wrapped around his body. They didn't include any of those on this NECA action figure. And then down on the shoe area, the design is a little different. What's going on with this? Is that like a tab? Like he's got like a Coke can around his foot? I'm not sure. But it's just, you know, it's nicely done. The toes stick out, kind of funny. They stick up. The original ones kind of stick down. If you look at his back, you can see that the original one, I don't know, his torso was just so much wider than this one. Like this one's a little skinny. He does have a decent shoulder presence, but, you know, the original one obviously just appears wider. So you got one rip right here with a little baby worm on the inside. That's cool. And then down here you have a couple other rips. However, the original one, that looks almost like, it looks like a suction cup. There's more suction cups like everywhere. So that's funny. But then above that suction cup, it looks like there's a bullet hole. So, I mean, that's just kind of confusing now. Back of the head, I mean, there's not really much more stuff to talk about. The animation hat and this NECA hat is very simplified. This one looks like there's some creasing, some crushing. I don't know. I'm just glad to have another worm. I think it's cool to finally get one. He's pretty happy about it too. He's talking. He's chattering his teeth. When it comes to articulation, Wyrm here has some decent articulation, but there's also things that, I don't know, it's going to limit you no matter what. And I'm going to get into it. Let's start from the eyes, all right? Look, the eyes, you can take them out very easily. They are luckily not too loose so that they don't just like pop out when you're moving them around. I personally like the bulging eyeballs more than these standard eyes. Yeah, they're not falling out. Like, this is still good. It's just, why would you want this when you can have the more expressive version of Wyrm? So there's a ball joint in the bottom of the head here, the base of the head. You could rotate that around pretty decently. Although he can't really look up too far. And you could look down. There's also a ball joint right here in the base of the neck. So I guess with that, you can look up really well. Like, oh man, you can just kind of have him like, if he's like crawling on the ground coming at guys. It's kind of freaky. Oh, look at that. The eyeball did just pop right out. I take back what I said. Another thing I gotta say is I like that the mouth is articulated. However, it is very loose. Like, it pops down pretty easily. No articulation in the upper torso. However, there is a swivel at the waist. Depending on how far you go, it actually still looks pretty good because the tears kind of match up the bottom, especially with the Wyrm belt in the way. So that's good. The shoulders rotate and they have a hinge. There is no bicep swivel up here, but the elbow does swivel and the elbows have a hinge as well. They go decent. The wrists of the hands swivel and they have a hinge too. Now here's like sort of like a complaint of mine. Like these hands I feel like are way too straight. Like they're too straight to look as though he's like reaching, or I don't know, they don't look menacing. Like you might want to have it more like this, where he looks like he's trying to come at you. Here he's just like kind of like, oh no guys, don't look at me, don't pay attention to me, I'm just sitting here, you know. That's my one complaint about that. Like I said, the elbow articulation does seem a little limited. And because there's no upper torso articulation, he is kind of stiff looking. Like he's just kind of stands straight up. I mean, you can't even bend at the waist there. Down here at the hips, you have the standard NECA ball jointed hips. I got no complaints about those. Those are pretty good. They are a little loose, but it's not too bad. The knees have a very ratchety joint, double jointed. Those are pretty good. Now, this kind of is a problem. You have this boot cut right here, right? But it's just too loose. It spins around way too fast. And when you're trying to pose them, lots of times this foot kind of pushes around. It just can be a little difficult trying to get him in the right spot. Then, of course, you have ankle rockers and a hinge. Oh my gosh. Like the peg is popping out of the calf there when I was moving around. As I said before, I do like that the leg here is a bendy wire leg. However, you know, you're not going to want to try to bend it up here too much. Not that you could, because it's so solid here. But I mean, if you bend it too much, eventually you're going to start cracking this paint. It's only a matter of time. But at least you can put it down here in the front so you can try to balance him like it was like a regular foot. And that is it for Wyrm. When it comes to proportion, it's honestly a little difficult to tell how much this guy matches up with the animation, because he seems to change a little bit. You know, sometimes his torso is a little smaller when he's, you know, hunched over. Sometimes it looks a little bigger. You know, it might just depend on when he's actually moving in the frame, but I don't know. Like, one of the things I would say is, like, the arms seem a little longer. This one especially seems like it sticks out a little more. I don't know, there's sometimes in that little sequence where the mouth seems a little flatter, like the top of the head seems flatter. He almost looks more of like a clamshell than this thing. Like this, there's a lot more mass in the top of his head there. If you're trying to get a good idea of how Wyrm scales with the Ninja Turtles, you know, basically give up, because I mean, this is the only shot. He's not standing next to any of the guys. So, you know, NECA had to use their imagination. And here you can see Wyrm with the exact same shot that I used for Tattoo, because I'm lazy and I didn't want to put all these guys out again. And you can see I think he looks pretty good next to all these guys. He is bigger than the Ninja Turtles, which is great. And I think, I don't know, just in general, he he fits in really well with all these guys. I kind of feel like when I look at, like, you can sort of see like maybe the different years. I have to go back and take a look and see who sculpted what here. But when you look at Wyrm, you kind of see, I don't know, something maybe even similar to like Anthrax. There's just something, I don't know, bulkier about his design. And you kind of want Wyrm next to Scumbug because in the Archie comics they were enemies. And yeah, I did put Muckman all the way in the back there, but according to the original Playmates action figure card, Muckman and Wyrm are supposed to be like the best of friends. Now, on to Wyrm's accessories. I've already talked about Wyrm's two sets of eyes. You have the regular one, and of course you have the set of bulging eyes. Unfortunately, at some point I think my Wyrm tipped over and like the eyes got a little damaged, so I'm just going to have to take a Sharpie or something like that and color that black pupil in. I kind of wish that they would have given him like a set of angry eyes or something like that to try to get some kind of so that you could try to get more expressions out of his face. But I mean, how would you be able to do that? Like, I understand that this is like these aren't eyebrows, right? You know, I think this is sort of like goop coming out of his eye socket. That's kind of what it looks like on the original action figure too. Maybe you could have had the goop sort of, I don't know, overflowing over his eyes, giving him like a nice angled downward stare, like he's ready to eat your face off. I also already mentioned his two sets of hands, you know, his gripping hands and also his reaching hands, his stretching hands, more like it. I don't know. I said this before too. I wish that they were more like he's reaching for you, like he's trying to get you as you're trying to get away from him. I also really wish he had a set of fists so much. But one thing I want to talk about is on the gripping hands. The blue gripping hand has a much bigger grip. That's for the mallet. But this red hand, you want to make sure that you put the wrench into this hand, because if you try to stick the mallet into this tighter grip, these green fingers will actually start to pull out. See that? You can see like the white underneath where the green is coming out from underneath the glove. There you go. It hasn't come fully out yet, but I have seen pictures on Facebook of people sharing their bad experience with the fingers coming out, so be careful. And now, onto the good stuff. First up, you have the trash compactor mallet. In the animation, this was simplified. You know, it lost all of the wood grain. There's no worms on the head of the mallet. It's all red, just like the original accessory. Here you can see NECA took quite a bit of inspiration from the original toy. As I said, there's all these worms in the head of the mallet. There's all these holes, just like here there's a hole. You know, I actually thought a couple times when I looked at this that this hole was here and that maybe a worm had fallen off, but no. It's just a decoration. The original one has like this extra splatter on the face of the mallet right there. The NECA version does not have that, but I think it's fine. You know, you don't need that extra splatter there. Plus, I really love just this goopy, thick blood on the face here. Like, it really looks like he was smashing the crap out of something. There are worms here on the head, but the original one, there's more worms, and they overlap each other. Here, I don't think there's any worms that overlap one another on the actual mallet. Now, when you get down to the handle, now you definitely do have a bunch of worms all overlapping each other. And it looks pretty cool. As I said before, it's covered in a wood grain, which is just, you know, nicely detailed. Got no complaints with this thing at all. You want to make sure you want to put this thing into the blue gripping hand because it is larger. And look at that. Time to go smash some bad guys. Up next is the Porcu-Pounder, or just the wrench, I guess. Why do you think they left the porcupine off of this wrench? Are they worried about animal cruelty? Or was it just a pain in the neck trying to sculpt this thing onto here? because you know, a wrench is a pretty simple design, but you'd really have to go out to making this porcupine on here. The wrench actually looks very similar, just the shape of it. Although I will say, the tape on the handle of the original one, I don't know, really looks like it's wrapped around there. Like this one, it just looks like masking tape, masked on or taped on there. Now, if you want to get Wyrm to hold this thing, you can't really put it in the blue hand because that has too big of a grip. So you put it in the red hand. The problem with the red hand is the red hand also has a very loose grip. So, you know, you're going to have to turn it a little sideways to get some friction going on there so he can actually hold it. Now, I like this weapon, but my problem with this hand, well, this arm really, and the wrench, is that you can't really, because of his sculpt of his arm, you can't really extend the hand in a way that looks like he's attacking somebody. And you'll see this later once I show like all my action shots, especially when I had him fighting Scumbug. It just doesn't look right. You know, it doesn't look extended enough. You know, it looks like he's still bent a little bit, like he's almost at attack, but not exactly there. I mean, I think it's fine seeing him hold this thing, but I kind of wish I could straighten the arm a little more. Real quick, as I was shooting this video, the original toy co-designer, David Arshosky, unfortunately passed away. David worked for Anaglyph Studios back in the 80s and 90s, and basically, when the guys at Mirage would send ideas to Playmates, Playmates would send those ideas to either Anaglyph or Varner. And David worked at Anaglyph, and he would take those Mirage designs and work them in his style, of course. So we all remember what Wyrm looked like in the Archie comic books. Well, that was how David had drawn Wyrm when creating, or the design for the action figure. Now, it wasn't just him all the time, because from what I understand, sometimes it would be like a back and forth process. At the time, Ryan Brown was the action toy coordinator at Mirage Studios. So designs, I think, would go back to him, and then maybe he might tweak it and send it back to David, and then, you know, it would work like that until Ryan finally gave the the final approval of the character. And then, of course, it would be sculpted by either, I know Scott Hensey did most of the sculpting at Anaglyph, but there are some other people there, and even some of David's designs made it over to Varner Studios because David had designed this Muckman action figure, but it wasn't sculpted by anybody at Anaglyph. It was actually sculpted by the people at Varner. So I know that's a lot of information, but basically I just wanted to say that David Arshosky put his stamp all over this series, and in my opinion, he really helped make it the success that it was back then, right? So, you know, thanks, David, for making all of our toy chests the best toy chests out of any generation in history. And also thanks for inspiring us to make great art. Rest in peace. You're probably wondering, what does this have to do with the Porcupounder? Well, right before David passed away, I was able to purchase some of these amazing zines from his son, who now runs the Turtle Milk Studios Facebook page. I would give him some time, but he said at some point he might put some of this stuff back up for sale. So, you know, keep that in mind. Support the family and let them know how much you appreciated their dad's, or at least his dad's, work. One of the coolest things about this is you get to see the creative process. And you also get to see designs that never made it to the toy. And look right here in this Turtle Stew zine, you have Toolbox, the porcupine. So was this the initial concept of what eventually became the Porcupounder? I mean, I feel like it's very similar to that idea. And that's all I wanted to point out. But, yep. And that leaves the Wyrm tongue. Now, this is very cool looking. You know, I love how detailed these worms are sticking out here. And it's very easy to put this in place, right? You can just click it right on the tongue, like so. There's a decent amount of friction there where it doesn't feel like it's falling off all the time. It's good. It's good. So, you know, I bet if they would have actually made him a Fred Wolf character, I bet they wouldn't have left the worm tongue. You know, maybe he would have had one, maybe his whole tongue would have been one worm when he would talk, and that would stick out of there. But, you know, something like this is a little complicated, in my opinion, you know. I'm surprised they actually did it in the commercial, like drew all those worms coming out of his tongue. And also it's just like a gross idea, right? Because whether it looks like this, where these worms appear as though they're boring their way into his tongue, you know, like he's got some kind of medical problem, or he's chewing on these things, because the original card says that he has a voracious appetite for munchy mouthworms. It's all disgusting. You know, worms in your mouth is disgusting. Worms in your digestion tract, that's also disgusting and bad, you know. Like, worms, the only place where worms are good is like the soil, you know, where it's breaking down, and it's good for growing things, but having them in your body, it's not a good combination. So are there any other accessories that they have included with Wyrm? Well, just like the wrench, they didn't include the worm knife in the commercial. So it might have been cool if NECA took some artistic liberties and created this thing, but for whatever reason, they didn't. And that's it. Although, in the Rat Plastic book, there's an extra worm accessory there next to the painted version of him. What do you think that worm was supposed to be? It almost kind of looks like a hook. I have another design from one of David Arshofsky's zines. In this Sidekicks Volume 1 little zine here, there's a Nightcrawler, the Bookie Worm. And it says right here, Pal of Wyrm. So that would have been interesting if we would have gotten that. I don't know how a Bookie Worm relates to a worm garbage man, but maybe the Bookie Worm throws the body in the trash and then Wyrm gets rid of him. I don't know. In Volume 2, there's also a tapeworm, but it doesn't say if that was meant to be anything. That's all. A little bit about Wyrm before I go. Wyrm, of course, was created by Ryan Brown. As I was making this video, Turtle Nexus released a video about Wyrm. Now, I don't usually watch other people's videos because I don't want to unintentionally steal from them. You know, I usually want to go into my videos fresh and pretty much do all my research alone. I'm a loner dotty, a rebel. I made up that line by myself. See, I don't steal. In that video, he reveals that Ryan was actually inspired by an old B movie called Attack of the Giant Leeches whenever he was creating Wyrm, and that Ryan Brown originally intended for Wyrm to be included in the Tales of the TMNT Volume 1. Now, from what I've heard, this dude was able to talk to Ryan through a middleman, because Ryan, unfortunately, is absent from social media. You know, I can't find any kind of contact or anything for him. Otherwise, I would have reached out to him and tried to get as much information as I possibly could. So I guess maybe the whole Wyrm versus Bloodsucker thing is just a case of parallel thinking. I also asked Rick Veitch a little while ago, like, if he knew whether or not Wyrm took inspiration from Bloodsucker, and he responded that he didn't know. He was unsure, which, you know, fair enough. Now, I kind of would have loved to have seen Wyrm in the original Mirage comic books. At the time, Lawson had an interesting style that's different from his, I don't know, current style, or even early 2000s, late 90s style. You know, maybe he could have made Wyrm as disturbing as he made the Rat King. But I'm also kind of glad that he wasn't in Tales from the TMNT, because maybe if Wyrm came out in Tales of the TMNT, we would have never gotten Bloodsucker in that story, The River, because The River is one of my favorite stories of all time when it comes to the Ninja Turtles. And maybe if Wyrm had existed in print before that, maybe Rick Veitch, I don't know, maybe he would have made some other cool monster that could have, Maybe it would have been a mosquito. It has to be something that was able to drain the blood from Raphael. So anyways, Wyrm in the Archie books looked amazing, in his Ryan Brown style, especially when he was drawn by Ken Mitroni. But I think he really became something unique whenever David Arshosky developed him and Scott Hensey sculpted him. He became something more, something unusually intriguing. Eventually, Wyrm did make it past the original run of the Turtles. He showed up in the 2012 show in the episode The Weird World of Wyrm, where he kept that cool Playmates toy design mostly. It's a little more cosmic. But here he's like a super powerful cosmic being, very different than the Wyrm in the old days. He also appeared in the IDW series in one of the greatest issues in the entire run. He was so creepy looking, and I loved him running around using his deadly mallet. Oh man, it's disturbing and wonderful. Whenever I get to my Playmates review of the original Wyrm action figure, I'll elaborate more on these appearances, but I just wanted to mention them here really quick. It's really a shame that Ryan sort of disappeared from all of social media and I don't think he really does any interviews. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to talk to him and say, hey, thanks for making such amazing Ninja Turtle characters, and also thanks for making such amazing artwork. Ryan Brown sure worked on a lot of things, but unfortunately, I don't think he ever penciled any single Mirage Ninja Turtle issues. But he did do a lot of inking, a lot of amazing inking back in the day. He worked on this Palladium book. I think that was the first thing he did for Mirage Comic Books when he got hired by them. He worked on all of the issues of Tales Volume 1. He inked all of those. He inked the majority of the Turtles' licensed artwork. I mean, these were drawn by Steve Levine and inked by Ryan Brown. All these images, filled our houses back in the day. Like, they were on trading cards, t-shirts, you name it. Our childhoods would have never been the same without these. There, of course, is more Wyrm that has come from Ryan Brown. I believe in this 1992 Mirage Studios style guide, I'm not going to 100% say this for sure, but I swear that's drawn by Steve Levine and also inked by Ryan Brown. He co-plotted many of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures comics with Dean Clarane, or Steve Murphy as we know. And he created the most Ninja Turtle toy designs out of everybody at Mirage. A lot of fantastic action figures were made by him. Outside of the Mirage universe, or the Turtles universe, he created the Cowboys of Moo Mesa. And then inside Mirage, he created another team of anthropomorphic animals, the Mutanimals. Now, most Turtle fans know that Ryan was trying to get a Mutanimals cartoon started in 1992, and it would have included Wyrm in his toy design, or close to the toy design. Now, in all honesty, I'm not sure if this would have worked or not, right? But what's more of a bummer is at first, Ryan created all those toy characters, and he created a lot of the Archie characters. And at the time, he had co-ownership over them. Then, and I'm guessing 1993, because that's when the creator credits disappeared from the bottom of the toy backer cards, Mirage issued their retroactive work-for-hire contracts. So Ryan and most of the other Ninja Turtle creators signed over all of their creations to Mirage. Now, before that, the dudes were getting paid extremely well, according to Ryan and even Kevin Eastman. And I would imagine, even if they sold their characters to Mirage, they probably were still being paid well up until the sale of the franchise. But, that, of course, is the big problem here. Eventually, Peter Laird sells everything to Viacom, and these dudes lose any stakes in any of these characters. They can basically never work on them again unless they, have to try to get work with IDW or Nickelodeon. What's even more of a bummer is 3 years before the purchase of the Turtles went through, Ryan Brown tried to buy back the Mutanimals, and he was denied. That's really gotta suck, because 3 years later, the property was sold, and now anytime somebody makes a Wyrm or any of the Mutanimals action figure or includes them in a comic book or the cartoon series or whatever, I don't think Ryan's getting any money from that. It was like they were paying him well at the time, but now he gets, I assume, nothing, unless he is still getting something. But from what I understand, once it went to Mirage, everything just went to Mirage that they, the creator signed over. I don't know. I just have so many mixed emotions and feelings about it that I guess I haven't figured out yet. I'm still thinking about all of it, because the Turtles succeeded because a lot of those secondary characters, they helped sell that toy line and make it the best toy line of all time. But also, without the Turtles, most likely these characters would never even have existed, right? Maybe Ryan could have been making these things on his own, but would they have gained the popularity if they weren't mixed in with the Ninja Turtle hype train? I don't know. What do you think about all this? Do you think Mirage was right to issue these contracts or not? I get at the time, they were getting sued by everybody, but I mean, come on. They were a part of the creators' Bill of Rights. I don't know. I wonder if those guys even made, if Peter gave them all money after he had sold it. I have to look into that too. I don't know. If you know any of this information, tell me. I'm curious. The brand new NECA, Fred Wolf, mostly, Tattoo, and Wyrm are some of the most interesting action figures that we've seen in this Ninja Turtle line to date. Both have completely unique bodies that will diversify your shelf and make your displays more dynamic than ever. Out of the two of them, I had the most fun posing Wyrm with his very expressive faces. Tattoo, I had a lot of fun too, but unfortunately, you can't look down with him at all. He can't look at anybody below him. He just looks straight ahead, no matter how you turn the head around. His body also makes attacks a little difficult, but I mean, let's be honest here. There's only so many poses that you would expect from a sumo wrestler. I was actually really glad I was able to get him into a somewhat sumo stance, where his knees and his feet are kind of pointing out to the sides. But then I wasn't able to get his hands down onto his knees or lean him forward at all. He just falls straight ahead, because, I mean, you kind of have to put his butt a little behind his feet, and you can't do that. I was impressed that I was able to get Tattoo to balance on one foot in a run pose. That was pretty cool. With Wyrm, however, I don't know, even though I love the expressive face, and just seeing pictures of this dude in the turtle lair makes me happy, I had a lot of trouble posing him. It's because of the legs, basically. And because of the upper torso is so stiff, but mostly because of the legs. The tentacle leg can be a problem if you're trying to make him run, or basically any pose, because you really have to wrap that tentacle on the ground and make it right, so that he's balanced with it. I also at one point accidentally pulled the tentacle leg off of his body, and it was actually kind of difficult getting it back onto the hip joint because it's a softer plastic or vinyl than the other pieces of his body. So trying to find the hole, I don't know, it was a little tricky. But more troublesome than that was his other leg, because the other hip is super loose. The knees are really good, they lock in place, but the boot cut is extremely loose, and that boot just spins around without any friction whatsoever. I'm getting a little bit of Super 7 vibes from this dude. Also, that giant foot, I guess is clown foot, makes it almost impossible to get him into some dynamic poses, because it doesn't rotate up far enough in the front. You can rotate it down pretty good, but I don't know, It goes as far as like a 90-degree angle. I also kind of wish that maybe Wyrm had a set of angry eyes. I just thought that would have been neat for attacking. It seems as though NECA sort of skimped out on the accessories in this set. You know, sure, maybe these sculpts cost too much because they're all like unique pieces. They had to start from scratch with these guys. But I would have at least have liked a set of fists for both of them. I feel like all these action figures in this series need fists. And not only for offensive purposes, but also because, I don't know, sometimes fists look good with different expressions or running poses, or heck, I mean, like maybe you want Wyrm to like shake his fist in anger at the other guy, right? You know, shaking a somewhat open gripping hand gives a very different type of message. Maybe you don't want to imply. So, but despite my complaints, I think these dudes look great. As I said, taking pictures of them in the sewer lair just looks wonderful. And with that, I'm done. So, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think, and have a good one.